Good morning, everybody. My name is Nathan Darris. I'm the data coordinator here at the Housing Resource Center at the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. Thank you for joining us. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into affirmative marketing and TDHCA multifamily properties. We're going to get started here in about 5 minutes. So at 10:05 to give everybody a chance to jump in and get situated. We will be doing questions throughout, just like normal. I don't, again, this is a new piece of software and I've only had about a week to play with it. So I don't know if the Q&A section or the Q&A box is going to work. If you have questions, try to put them in Q&A, or you can put them straight into the chat box. We'll answer from both places. We should go about 30, maybe 35 or 40 minutes on the slides with plenty of time for questions. So we'll go for about an hour total, but we will have significant time for questions. So don't feel like you're going to be wasting anybody's time. Put those questions in. In the meantime, I am going to go ahead and put up a quick poll. It's going to help me figure out, who all is here and if I need to tailor anything a little bit differently for this session. So I'm going to put that poll up here in a second. And like I said, we will get started at 10:05. Also, if you look in the chat, there are a few links and a few files. The links we will use throughout this, but I would save those links. They are linked to our forms and downloads page, also to a new tool we created. We'll talk about that a little bit, and to the affirmative marketing tool, the mapping tool. So we'll look at all of those things today. And if you can't get the files to download, just let me know. We'll email them to you afterward. You don't need them for now. It's just the slides and a form for later. But and with that said, we'll start at 10:05. Okay, good morning, everybody. We've already had our little technology gremlins rear their heads. I couldn't get the poll to pull up fast enough, and now I'm going to have trouble actually trying to get it to close. So let's see if we can get this to work. Uh, we got it to work. So about half of you here today have had to either create or update an affirmative marketing plan. And it looks like most people have the hardest time determining a methodology for how to identify least likely to apply populations. Well, I have really good news. That is going to be a big chunk of what we're talking about and a big reason for one of the new tools that we're going to introduce today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Nathan Darris. I'm the data coordinator here at the Housing Resource Center at the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. This is Affirmative Marketing in TDHCA Multifamily Programs. We are going to go for about 35 minutes. If you have questions, please go ahead and put them into the chat window. You can also try to use the Q&A box, but I don't think the Q&A box is working quite well, so the chat window will do just fine. We'll answer those throughout, probably mostly at the end of the webinar, but we'll do both. If we seem to have a couple of people who are having trouble with sound, if you can raise your hand if you are well, no. Raise your hand if you're able to hear me, and I can get an idea of how many people are having this issue. Okay, it looks like the vast majority of people are able to hear. So, okay. If you're not having sound, you might want to check your sound settings. This is a new piece of software for me. We just got rid of GoToWebinar. I would be able to walk everybody through it, but you might want to check your sound settings and log in, log back out. That's a great idea. I'm just going to go over some housekeeping for the next minute or two, so you're not going to miss anything if you're jumping out and then jumping back in. So, like I said, my name is Nathan Darris. We at the Housing Resource Center, we oversee affirmative marketing plans and review affirmative marketing plans for the department. If you happen to be here because you need housing assistance, or if you have tenants you know of who may need housing assistance, rental assistance, may need to find affordable apartments, this QR code, you can give that to them. You can give them this link to Help for Texans. It's our part of the website where people can find affordable housing that participates in our programs, also any rental assistance that we may have through our partner agencies throughout the state. If you have other questions that are unrelated to affirmative marketing or fair housing, you can also email info@tdhca.texas.gov or use that mainline phone number there. That'll get you that information. Just another quick disclaimer here. I am not an attorney. I cannot give you legal advice, and TDHCA is not able to provide legal advice to the general public. And this webinar is not going to fulfill any continuing education credit requirements. It is informational only. If you do need proof of attendance, at the end of the webinar, go ahead and email me. I'll put that email address up at the end as well, but it's fair.housing@tdhca.texas.gov. And I will be able to confirm whether or not you attended the webinar, but I don't have the ability to send out certificates this time around. If you do have multiple people logged in under a single email, if you're like multiple people watching on one computer, I'm not going to be able to determine whether or not there were 5 people sitting in front of that computer or not. So I can only verify an email address or one name that was here. So all of the materials that we have today and the recordings will be available on the TDHCA YouTube channel and the TDHCA website. If you have any questions, like I said, put them into the questions box or the chat box. Either one of those will work. And after every segment, we'll try to answer questions as they come in. If you are here because you are trying to satisfy the requirements in Texas Administrative Code for post-bond closing or for the 10% test for housing tax credits, also please email me at the end because this webinar does not count toward that, but I can get you the referrals to the right groups that do have that training available. So for those of you who have never had to do affirmative marketing, what even is this? Well, affirmative marketing in TDHCA monitor programs is something that you are required to do. What it is essentially additional marketing to groups of people who may not already know about your property and about any services that you may have. It is also, as I said, a requirement for TDHCA monitored multifamily properties. What affirmative marketing is not is any kind of quota or limitation or preference on who can or cannot apply or live at your property. It's also not a punishment or a failure or an admission of guilt. Our philosophy on affirmative marketing is that we want to make sure that you're doing it right. We're not trying to play gotcha. When we review your plans, we say that we have, and we say that we've identified areas of noncompliance. These are not formal findings. This is just our way of saying that something in your plan doesn't meet our rules, and we will also explain how to rectify that issue. You're always welcome to ask us questions. It's also why we have this webinar. We want to make sure that you're doing it right. We're not trying to punish you for doing it wrong. I will be honest with you, the only way that you're going to get a formal finding on affirmative marketing is if you're simply not doing it, and then when we say, hey, you need to do this, you don't respond to us. That's going to be the only way that you're going to get punished, and otherwise it's just going to be a lot of technical assistance and guidance to help make sure you're doing it right. So where people live and what media they consume is not necessarily simple, and it's not exactly evenly distributed throughout a population or a city or even your own neighborhood. As such, traditional marketing can and does often miss entire groups of people who may be interested in living in your apartment complex. And just as complex as people are, and their media consumption habits are, affirmative marketing can also be a bit confusing and complicated at times as well. Uh, we understand that it is complicated, trust us. Also, the regulatory environment is not always so static or easy to understand. There are 3 different federal agencies that oversee programs that at some point in time required affirmative marketing. And TDHCA also has affirmative marketing requirements. So, depending on what funding sources your property has, you may have HUD or USDA, or you might have low income housing tax credits. That's 3 different federal agencies that you've got to be dealing with, plus TDHCA. So TDHCA has taken several steps to make affirmative marketing easier, faster, require less data analysis on your part. You guys are property managers and owners. You're not data analysts. So this isn't what you were hired to necessarily do. I mean, it is what you were hired to do, but it's not really a main function. So what we looked to back at was TDHCA's rules and requirements, and we boiled them down to 5 main things that an affirmative marketing plan needs to do or have. So those are going to be the things that we do. So what are those 5 things? Explain how you will identify least likely to apply populations, or in shorthand, the methodology. Identify those least likely to apply populations using that methodology. Identify community groups and organizations that serve those populations. Provide those groups with information about your property at least once a year, and then update your plan once every 5 years. So the very basic level, an affirmative marketing plan is just a report or a document or a form that explains who you will affirmatively market to, how you determined who needed additional marketing, who you're going to give the marketing materials in order to make sure that you hit that target group, and what materials you're sending to those groups. Luckily, there are at least 2 readily available forms that will help make it easier to build an affirmative marketing plan. You are all, at least if you have done affirmative marketing before, familiar with a HUD 935.2A affirmative marketing plan form. No matter what program your property participates in, this form will cover that program. That includes whether you have USDA, home investment partnerships, any other HUD funding, or if you're low-income housing tax credit only. I will say, if you only have low-income housing tax credits and no other federal funds, this form has a lot of information that TDHCA doesn't need, but it will still meet our requirements. And this is just kind of like the very first section of the HUD 935 already has items that TDHCA doesn't need, but maybe the federal agencies do. So while you're the next part of the HUD 935.2A form is your targeted marketing activity. It's where you identify your least likely to apply populations will be found. As far as TDHCA is concerned, you always have to select persons with disabilities. That's going to be basically true for almost all federal programs as well, not just TDHCA programs. Additionally, your LURA might require additional marketing to veterans. This is not considered to be affirmative marketing. It's part of your general marketing requirements. And it's not non-compliant to add veterans to the other ethnic group box, but it doesn't satisfy your veterans marketing requirement either. That's going to be separately looked at by our compliance staff. Again, remember, persons with disabilities always is a least likely to apply population, and you should always fill out worksheet 1. It is a requirement for HUD. And if you are using this form, it's a requirement for TDHCA for the most part. There are some exceptions to that. One question that has already come in, and I was hoping to avoid this for the time being because it requires a little speculation, but it is kind of important. HUD has proposed ending affirmative marketing plans. If this passes, will TDHCA stop requiring them? So what's important to note is that this is not a bill, it's not a law, it is HUD regulations in the Code of Federal Regulations. It's not technically passed by Congress or anything like that. So if HUD does stop requiring or reviewing affirmative marketing plans, that rule is separate from TDHCA's rule, which is the 10-TAC 10.801. At this point, there is no indication that TDHCA will stop requiring affirmative marketing. So if you are in a LIHTC program or you have any funds through TDHCA, we do not have any plans right now to stop requiring them. So you will continue to do affirmative marketing for the time being. The next section of, so this is worksheet 1 of the HUD 935.2a. For TDHCA, at a minimum, you need to have your property demographics, your census tract data, your housing market data, and the expanded market data and the applicant data. Those are optional. So those yellow check marks, those are optional columns. The green check marks are required columns. Same thing with worksheet 3. You do need to identify target populations and community contacts that serve those populations. So that's why those green check marks are there on that 935 form. If you use instead the TDHCA simplified form, which is available on our website right now, you can also follow the instructions directly on the form. Optional items are noted as optional, but everything else should be filled out. But unlike the HUD 935-2A form, it's only 2 pages long. And the only things that you need to add are your marketing materials, which is a simple attachment. That's going to be the only additional information that you would need. Every other piece of information that you need is available or is covered on this form. Any screenshots that you take also will be necessary. So we've used the term least likely to apply populations. What is a least likely to apply population? Very simply, it is a population that you would expect there to be more of at your property based on who lives around you. We can simplify that even more. So yes, I know we've got some numbers, we've got some math up here, but it should be nothing past, it's not even pre-algebra, so we should be good here. If you're intrigued by the basic probability stuff and you want to see more of it, please let me know, and how you can apply in other areas. We do have another training that we conducted on random selection. Just a little plug there. If you're interested in that, let me know and I can get you the recording. But essentially, based on what we see here, right, there are 20 shapes in the picture to the left. There's 10 circles, 10 squares. If you randomly selected from these, you would expect about half of the ones you select to be squares, half of them to be circles. But marketing and people aren't really random. So if you just advertise in one neighborhood, which is that red oval, you will notice that you're not even close to 50-50. It's actually 2-to-1 circles to squares. And just like shapes, people don't live evenly distributed in all neighborhoods. And they don't all go to the same churches. They don't go to the same restaurants. They don't go to the same movie theaters. And this is just an example of what we would call a methodology here. You can use it if you like, or you can come up with your own, but this is just a little bit of math that we do to determine what a least likely to apply population is. So TDHCA's rules do have only one requirement here. Your methodology can't just look at one thing. So for instance, you can't just look at the market area and say anything less than 10% of the population is the least likely to apply group. Your methodology does need to compare your property to a larger area like the market area or to the county. In some cases, you can also look at the census tract and compare the census tract to the market area or to the county. Whatever cutoffs you use are up to you. In this example, we're going to use a 20% difference, and we'll walk through that. So in our example, we can identify who the least likely to apply population is fairly simply. So we know that half of the whole area, which is our market area, are squares. Half of the whole market area are circles. We've circled the red the area. These are the people who live on our property right now. We don't want to just willy-nilly decide who is least likely to apply population, because if we looked at just who's on our property, we would say, oh, squares are least likely to apply. We want to make sure that that's actually the case, though, because if squares don't make up 30% of the whole population, sorry, we want to make sure that we have a good decision rule in place. So if the group of shapes that lives on our property is less than 80% of what the real population is, then it's the least likely to apply population. That's our example rule. So in this example, right, half of the area is squares, and in our property, only 33% of our property are squares. That is less than 80% of half. It's less than 40%. That means that squares are, in fact, at least likely to apply population as we suspected, but we tested it to find out. This is just another quick example using the exact same method in the last slide, and it shows a little bit of a different place. So if our population now in our property is this red circle at the top left, nothing else has changed about the market area. We just are a different property now. So still half of the area are squares, half are circles. But in our property, 57% are squares and 43% are circles. Again, 80% of 50% is 40%, just like on the last slide. None of the shape groups are at less than 40% of our of our property's population. So there are no least likely to apply populations here. It is important to note that we are not trying to change who lives on our property. We're not changing where our normal advertising is going. This is just adding a little bit more targeted advertising. So we're not even going to change who applies at our property, just increase the number of, in this case, squares who know that our property exists. So if we add some advertising, which is the green circle, to a different neighborhood, we now have a different and large group of shapes that is a little bit more representative of the population as a whole. In fact, it's exactly representative just by adding a little bit extra marketing to a targeted area. And once you now think of these shapes as a person living in your city and each one of them a potential applicant who might want to apply to live at your property, affirmative marketing really just does become increasing the number of people who know about your property. And it's about trying to make sure that there are no groups of people who just aren't getting your advertising. You have a quick question come in. Are we able to use the simple form for properties that are layered with MDLF and or Section 811? The answer is yes. For TDHCA, you can use the simplified form no matter what funding source you have, which is the reason why we use this. We created the simplified form. That simple form, if you are submitting a plan to TDHCA on that form is going to work for all those programs. So that was the idea of it. We'll go over that form too in a little bit more closely. So this is almost always the hardest part of affirmative marketing for a lot of people, and this is determining where in the world you're supposed to get all of this data from. And the primary source of all of this data is going to be the United States Census Bureau. So what you first need to do, right, determine your market area. Where are the people who apply to your property come from? Where do they come from? Where are you advertising in general? Usually you're going to call your market area, it's going to be a county or a city or an MSA, which is a metropolitan statistical area. The Census Bureau has a large repository of demographic data that covers city, county, metropolitan statistical areas, and a whole bunch of other geographies available. And those relevant demographics are found in a few different tables. I've got those noted here. The main one is the DP, or Demographic Profile 5, DP05. You can also get households with children data from the table S1101 and people with disabilities from S1811. There's a link here to data.census.gov. That's where you can find all of that information. We are going to go over how to pull that data. So we're now going to walk through how to determine the least likely to apply population using the American Community Survey, or the this is the same as the Census Bureau data. We're going to use Harris County um, just as an example here. So based on a randomly chosen property that TDHCA monitors, it ended up being in Harris County. So let's say you're a property manager for a multifamily property in Harris County, and you have to develop your affirmative marketing plan for your property. Your plan needs to indicate how you will effectively market to potential tenants who are least likely to apply at your property. So in this example, we're going to go to data.census.gov, the link that we just put in that search bar. It's the first thing, the biggest thing that shows up when you get to data.census.gov. You're not going to have to hunt for it. You're going to just type in the table number DP05 and the ACS demographic housing estimates will come up. You can click on that and this will bring up data for the entire United States. That's how it starts. It always starts with the data for the entire United States. We do want to make sure very quickly that we are looking at the most recent 5-year estimates data profile. Reason why, and this is a problem that's specific, not specific to Texas, but it particularly happens in Texas rural areas. There's not enough data in the 1-year profiles to produce estimates for census tracts. And even in some counties do not have enough people to produce these estimates. So as long as you're using the 5-year profiles, you will have data for the census tract and the county. That is at a minimum. If you're using 1-year profiles, there are no census tract data. There's no census tract data there. And your county might not even exist there. We're going to select geography to change geography because we don't care about the United States as a whole. We care about our population. So you select geos or geographies. There's several options you want to use at some point, but we're going to start with tract. Just to clarify, place in the context of the Census Bureau is the same as like a city. That's just what the Census Bureau calls things like cities and towns. It is a thing you can use in lieu of a county if you so choose. When you select tract, you will then have to select the state that you want, which is Texas, obviously, and then the county that you want. We already established we're going to look at Harris County. So you're just going to go through these menus and drill down into smaller and smaller geographies. Is the census data still the best place to market for a senior residential community? The census data is the best place to get all of this data in general. I think what you're asking is, do you need to market to households with children? If you are a senior property, no, you do not need to market to households with children, but you do still need to do the other parts of affirmative marketing. So you still need to do based on race, ethnicity, and persons with disabilities. So we've got down to our census tracts. You're going to search to find the correct census tract here. If you don't know your tract, you can find it using one of a couple different tools, and we'll talk about those in a second. Either the TDHCA Multifamily affirmative marketing tool or something called the FFIEC geocoder. There are other ways to do it. Those are just the two easiest that I know of. In this particular instance, right, we're going to be in census tract 5304 of Harris County. Just to make your life easier, then you want to go ahead and hide all of the columns that you don't need. So we're going to hide every column except for our census tract 5304. And then also we're going to select county and Harris County as a geography. We just want the percent rows. We don't need any columns. We don't need anything else. All the rest of it is just going to make everything more complicated. Anything that we see that's below 1% of the population of the county, in this case, is not going to be identified. It doesn't need to be identified as the least likely to apply population. It doesn't matter if our method would identify them. If they make up less than 1% of the market area, they're not needed to be at least likely to apply population. And then you also can do the exact same thing with families with children by using the S1101 table and just going through the exact same steps. But basically, when we're trying to find least likely to apply populations, those two X's are on populations that don't even make up 1% of the city of Houston. I guess we use city in this particular instance here. So even though, right, American Indian and Alaskan Native is 0% of the tract or on your property's demographics, and Asian makes up 0% of the tract or in your property, those would not be considered least likely to apply populations. I mean, you could do it, but it's going to be very difficult and it's not required. Just a quick little eyeball here using like our 20% test. We do know that there are two populations that are most likely going to be least likely to apply. We can still do the math, but it's pretty clear on these, right? White, the census tract is about half the rate in the city, and same thing for Asian in this case. It's at 0%. So nobody in this tract is Asian, or nobody on your property in this particular, if you want to use your property's data, but 8% of the city is. So those would be real obviously underrepresented populations in that tract. That's who we would identify as least likely to apply populations. Again, if you are a property that is not an elderly limitation or supportive housing, you do have to include households with children in your analysis. However, if you are a property that is that has a senior elderly limitation or is supportive or transitional housing only, you do not need to identify or even do the analysis for households with children as far as we're concerned. But if you do need to do it, we are literally just going to step by step go through those same steps that we just did for a different table, S1101. In this particular case, we're only going to look again at the total or the percent estimate for the two geographies. You hide everything else just to make your life simpler. In this case, right, it doesn't look like households with one or more people under 18 years it's not underrepresented in the census tract, so it wouldn't be a least likely to apply population in this particular example. Again, you may want to use, and you should use, property demographics if you have them. TDHCA properties are already required to submit this data at least annually. It's in your annual owner's compliance report, or the AOCR. So you have that data. Your property has that data somewhere. Your property might not be fully leased up, or tenants are not always required to tell you their demographics. So you might not have enough information based on your property's data, which is why you may want to use the census tract instead. And that's perfectly allowable, right? If you don't have access to your property demographics, or not enough of your households report their demographics, you can use census tract instead. So while this is likely not going to be a problem for an extended period of time, and in fact, I haven't checked this morning, um, if you're trying to use the census website, at least the last few weeks when the government was shut down, the census data was not working. It should work now. Again, I haven't checked it today, but I think it should be up and running again. But again, if for some reason the government sources are not available for any reason, there are other options out there. The census data is not the only place. The Census Bureau is not the only place to go. You can use something called IPUMS. They maintain a large collection of the ACS and census data. They're not affected by interruptions in government services. But there's also the TDHCA tool that can be used. So this tool works equally well on a desktop. I've tested it on laptops, tablets, and smartphones. Feel free to use this QR code that's on the right. You can quickly find your way to the tool there. There's also the link at the top of the slide there. Feel free to follow along if you want on your phone. Really important to note here, if you use this TDHCA tool and you use the TDHCA simplified form, the only step you need to take for all of that data that we just talked about is to screenshot the yes or no part of the pop-up here for when you attach a screenshot to your plan. If you use the given least likely to apply populations here, and we're going to see how it zooms in right now to a specific property, and it scrolls down to, you can search by address there. You can scroll down, you can see all of the data available, but at the very bottom, it's going to show you a spot that says yes or no, whether a population is considered least likely to apply, we have done all of the data work for you. So you don't need to do any additional work. You don't need to get any additional data. You don't need to have a methodology described. You just need to make sure that the populations you select on your form match the populations that say yes in the TDHCA tool. You can use, one of the great things is, this is new in Windows, is Windows Shift S to open the screenshot tool. If you're on a Mac, you can use Command Shift 4. And the affirmative marketing tool page includes instructions on how to take those screenshots and how to use the tool as well. Some general considerations that you might want to look at here. Persons with disabilities must always be identified as least likely to apply, regardless of data or methodology. You don't have to identify a population as least likely to apply if they make up less than 1% of your market area population. Being less than 1% of the population in a census tract or on your property does not disqualify the population from being least likely to apply. In fact, it's going to be more likely that they will be. When you establish your methodology for identifying least likely to apply populations, make sure you use that methodology consistently. And when you update your plan every 5 years, you can always look to see if your marketing efforts have been successful by looking at past plans and looking at the least likely to apply populations. Have those changed? Have you reduced the number of least likely to apply populations? That sort of thing. That's just a good way to look and see if your marketing efforts are successful. So at this point, I am going to take a second here and I am going to actually bring up the tool here live. This is the new multifamily affirmative marketing tool. Rhonda asks, what is the track to pull for persons with disabilities? You have DP05 and S1101. The other one is S1801. I'll roll back here. S1811, excuse me, S1811 is going to be the number that you need for persons with disabilities. So let's take a quick look at the new tool here. So the first part of this page is instructions telling you how to use the tool. So even if you don't remember what we talked about here, this is going to give you all of that information. On the map itself, these blue dots, they represent TDHCA properties, TDHCA monitored multifamily properties. These are anything that has low-income housing tax credits. So your property may not exist on here. Let's just go ahead and we'll use Houston again. Your property may not be on this list because you have only home funding. It's rare. There's only like a handful of properties this is going to apply to, but we're going to talk about how you can solve that problem here. So we're going to zoom in. We're going to look at one particular property here. I don't know which property this is, and I don't know why the internet is there we go. The internet is being particularly slow. McKee City Living is the name of this property. If you click on the property itself, it brings up all of the information. It gives you the address and everything, tells you what census tract you're in. So if you still have that old HUD 935 form and you don't want to particularly change anything yet, you still have a bunch of information in this tool that you can use. So if you look, it has all of the data for your census tract. So the census tract percent of different populations, including households with children, which right now has an error, but we're fixing that. And also persons with a disability, that also has an error right now we're fixing. Everything else is correct. County, it has all the county data on it. And then it also quickly identifies for you whether or not it meets that 20% test or the 80% test that we used in our examples. That's what this uses. If you include this screenshot of these yes, no populations, that's it. That's all you need to do for us. That's all that we're going to need to know as long as your form matches what these yes and no's are. That's all that's going to matter. All the other data is available if you still want to fill out worksheet 1. That's fine too. If you want to use a different method, that's up to you. But let's say that your property isn't here. Well, that's okay because we're going to use a fake. It's not fake. It's a real address, but 221 East 11th Street. This is the physical location for TDHCA. So just in case your property isn't one of these dots and you can't really find it, you can still use this tool. So we're going to go and look at 221, the State Insurance Annex Building. Notice there's no dot here, right? There's no property, but we can still click that area. And you'll notice it highlights the census tract. This means that since we don't have property data available, we can use the census tract data. It does the exact same thing for the census tract as it would for the property here. It still gives you all of the census tract data. You just don't have an address here and all the property information specifically. It still gives you the county demographics, and it still produces the yes, no, least likely to apply safe harbor populations. So this tool will be immensely helpful. It will help you figure out almost all of the information that you need in order to do your least likely to apply populations analysis. So that's the reason why we built this. It will be updated every January when new data from the Census Bureau is available. So it's always going to be up to date with the most recently available. There's like a 2-month period where it's not the most recently available, but if you're using the tool, it doesn't matter. This is a safe harbor. You're allowed to use the tool, even if it's in that 2-month period where there's technically some newer data. And this will always be up and available, and it will be updated with the newest data you have. And again, all of those instructions are here as well. There's another link to a training for affirmative marketing. I'm also going to link this video, this recording of this video, to the tool page here. Everything that you need is available there. Let's go back to our presentation slides here. So now that we've identified our least likely to apply populations, we need to fill out our community contact section. Well, what is a community contact? Community contacts are simply organizations in the community that primarily serve a least likely to apply population. It's generally preferable to avoid using things like businesses, as the clientele and the staff are much less correlated with the populations you're looking for. For an example, a restaurant, regardless of the food type served, attracts diners who may not share the ethnicity or culture of those who are typically associated with that type of food. So a Chinese restaurant isn't necessarily going to have mostly Asian clientele. So that's why we try to avoid that. To be even more explicit, right? Uh, there are obviously exceptions to that, right? In Austin, for example, I know of several Asian grocery stores and markets that do draw in Asian households. They are located in neighborhoods that have more Asian households in them, and that's the clientele they tend to draw. So that would be an exception. But in general, it's best to avoid businesses as a contact and stick to nonprofits or similar organizations. This is not an exhaustive list, obviously, because there are other populations. This is just some examples for a couple of groups that may be considered least likely to apply. Families with children is super easy, which is why I didn't even put this up here. The local schools are a perfect place to list as a community contact. So find somebody at the school you can identify, and everybody there who is a parent has a minor in the household. Basically, it's almost guaranteed. So schools are a great place to find a community contact that primarily serves that least likely to apply population. It is possible that you can't identify a community contact. It's more likely to happen in smaller towns and in very rural areas. Urban and suburban areas almost never have this issue, but it does come up. If you cannot find a community contact, document the steps that you took in your plan, and document the steps that you took. The reasons that you give have to have evidence provided, right? Obviously. And then you can also try expanding your search to a larger geography, maybe even the next town over or the next largest city over from you. If you rural, but you may have people who work in, say, a city that's a little further away, that is perfectly fine. Go ahead and expand your search area. All right. The next thing that you need to include in an affirmative marketing plan are obviously your marketing materials. What are you going to send to your community contacts? Um, well, this would be a great time to include any promotional brochures or sheets that you use to market more generally. If you take out any static ads on like a website or in a newspaper, screenshot or a copy of those is something to include. But again, those are optional. TDHCA only requires the community contacts. But if you do conduct any affirmative marketing that uses more standard media, then include those as well, copies of those as well. But the basic minimum requirement here is that the letter be addressed to each, you have to have a letter that's addressed to each community contact, and that those letters are dated and addressed, that they provide basic property information about what types of units or amenities are available, contact information for how to contact the property or how to request a reasonable accommodation need to be both in English and Spanish. And it also needs to have, at a minimum, the fair housing logo. There are other things you can. There's like a longer statement. The icon or this logo here is much easier to include, and it meets the requirements. HUD had other stricter rules about the size of the fair housing logo. TDHCA does not. We don't have like a minimum pixel dimension or size ratio or imperial or metric, unit measurements that you need to hit. Just make sure it's visible. And if you have additional questions on how to conduct affirmative marketing, please let me know. Now, at this point, I'm going to pull up the new simplified form because I think people wanted to see that as well. Give me one moment. So we have created a new form that is a fillable PDF. I will be putting this link up on our affirmative marketing tool page. But you'll notice it's very simple. You can literally just type in the information here. There are check boxes that apply. It gives you links to the affirmative marketing tool itself. Um, and it's basically, again, step-by-step directions on uh, how to fill out the affirmative marketing form here and how to do the affirmative marketing itself. So that form, this is the simplified form we've been talking about. For any property that TDHCA monitors, if you are submitting an affirmative marketing plan to us, this form is enough. And if it's not mentioned on this form, it is not needed. So the only thing that's not on this is, right, if you have screenshots, you got to attach them on a separate page, or your marketing materials. Those are really going to be the only things that don't fit on this form. And that's just because the page isn't big enough to have your marketing materials for you. So there's that. Then also and this is listed on our affirmative marketing tool page and also on our tools page, is a new form that we have created. This is something that you can, if you have your affirmative marketing plan already figured out, and you just need to see if it's compliant with our rules, you can just fill this little form out. So, right, I'll just make up a CMTS ID number. We're going to make up a county that it's in, and it's going to be general and family, right? So we would go through all of these steps. And by the time that I am done filling all of this out, I'm just really quickly putting some things in. It doesn't matter what the answers are here. And we're going to say all the above. We get to the end of it and we view the results, and it identifies areas that are not compliant with our rules. and it gives you some feedback about how to fix it. So under TDHCA rules, persons with disabilities must be selected as the least likely to apply population. So for every area that is not compliant with our rules, you'll get an explanation for it. This tool is also available on our affirmative marketing tool page and our fair housing downloads and tools page as well. So those are all available. And at the very beginning of the meeting, I also linked those as well. So all of these links are here and available for you. Um, so with that, that's all that I have prepared. And we can jump into some questions here. The first question that we have is, we are a nonprofit with scattered sites and use our Facebook page to post vacancies. Can you use a screenshot of the post in your annual plan? You did not include it last year. Yeah, you can just use a screenshot of that plan. And again, that's if you're, again, so this is the little bit of a way behind the scenes technical thing on Facebook. Facebook, you cannot um, target your advertising based on demographic groups. That is a way to make sure that people who advertise housing on Facebook do not purposefully try to not uh, advertise to certain groups. It's a fair housing safeguard measure. So Facebook, you're probably not really going to be using as affirmative marketing anyway. If it's just part of your general marketing, you don't need to include it. We only need to see ads that you take out that are for your affirmative marketing, so targeted toward the least likely to apply populations that you have identified. That's going to be the the screenshots or the advertising that we would need to see, but not your general marketing. I am not seeing any additional questions here. Again, I'm willing to wait for another minute or two to give people a chance to type. I know this is highly technical material, and we kind of did a very short overview of it. We're really hoping that the tool is going to be particularly helpful for all of you, and kind of save you all a lot of that data analysis on your end. So hopefully that's why nobody has questions. But I'm still not seeing any questions. If you have questions, I'll bring up our slides again here. If you have questions that you don't think of right now, but they come to you later, you can always email me at fair.housing@tdhca.texas.gov. I'll put that into the chat as well. You can always email me there to ask questions. This is also just more of the links to our sample forms and downloads and tools page, and then to our affirmative marketing mapping tool. If you have other questions that are unrelated to affirmative marketing or fair housing issues, we have our other contact information here as well. That, any inquiries you have, you can call either of these numbers here, or you can email us at info@tdhca. That should be tdhca.texas.gov. There, I fixed it on this slide. You can email us at info@tdhca.texas.gov. The other one will still go through. It just is old and we're not trying to advertise it. We changed over to texas.gov a while ago. So with that, I don't have any additional material. We don't have any additional questions. I appreciate you all coming out and joining us. Look for in your, if you are on our listservs, look for information on our next upcoming webinar. It'll be on December 9th. It's going to be about written policies and procedures, and how we handle written policies and procedures reviews. So if that is of interest to you, if you have anything to do with your written policies and procedures at your property, please feel free to join us for that. You'll be seeing it on our calendar and on in our listservs coming out. It may have actually come out yesterday even. So feel free to join us for that. With that in mind, I appreciate y'all coming out, and enjoy the rest of your day, and enjoy your Thanksgiving as well.